The wind howled through the narrow alley behind the animal shelter, rattling the steel trash bins and screaming through cracked windows like a banshee in mourning. Snow hammered against the panes with relentless fury, turning everything outside into a white blur of chaos and cold. Inside, the shelter's heaters struggled to keep pace with the temperature drop, coughing out warmth that barely reached the corners of the room. Every bark, whimper, and scratch echoed louder than usual, a chorus of desperation woven into the fabric of the storm. And yet, in all that noise, there was something else pressing against the walls, an unspoken urgency, a ticking clock. Somewhere, a decision loomed. Somewhere, someone had hours left. Amid the chaos, tails thumping, nails scraping against metal, voices crying for a hand to reach in and choose them. There was a stillness that felt heavier than the snow outside. In the farthest cage, tucked beneath a flickering bulb, lay a German shepherd with matted fur and hollow eyes. She didn't bark, she didn't move. She didn't even lift her head when a pup beside her whimpered for warmth. Her ribs showed through her thinning coat, and her breathing was so shallow it looked like she was fading, piece by piece. She wasn't waiting to be chosen. She had stopped waiting altogether. Claire stared at the frosted window of the small cafe across from the shelter, her hands curled tightly around a paper coffee cup that had long gone cold. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago, but her feet wouldn't carry her home. Not yet. She hadn't slept well. Again, another night of twisting thoughts. Another morning where her reflection looked like someone else's, 35, newly divorced, living in a friend's spare room with half her belongings in storage. There was an ache in her chest she hadn't been able to name. She wasn't sure if it was grief or just the echo of something missing. Claire's fingers tightened around the cup. Dr. Banner's voice floated back into her mind, soft but piercing. The words hadn't made sense then. She didn't need more. Silence in her life, she'd had enough of that in her marriage. But now, as she looked across the street and saw the shelter lights flickering against the storm, something inside her shifted. Not quite a decision, more like a pull. Not everything needed to be fixed. Some things just needed to be held, even if they couldn't ask for it. She didn't bring an umbrella. The snow clung to her coat, soaked through her boots, made her hair stick to her cheeks. As the door creaked shut behind her, the warmth inside felt like stepping into another world, familiar yet distant. Her feet moved on instinct, not intention. She didn't know what she was doing here. She wasn't planning on adopting. She wasn't planning anything at all. She just couldn't bear to keep sitting still while something inside her kept falling apart. Behind the front desk, Marla sat hunched, glasses sliding down her nose, eyes fixed on a clipboard with a weariness that only years of hard choices could bring. The red stamp hovered in her hand, already inked, already destined for another form. "It's a hard call," she mumbled, more to herself than anyone. No one claimed her. No chip, no tags, no interest. Claire stepped closer. The top of the form read, Canine ID number 403, female EST, age 6 to 7, final notice. The date read today. The time, 3 p.m. Dozens of eyes stared back at her, hopeful, loud, pleading. But it was the silence that screamed loudest. Her gaze wandered cage to cage, but always came back to that corner. The German shepherd hadn't moved. Not even an ear twitch. It was like the dog knew, like she'd accepted her fate and made peace with it. Claire's breath caught. Why couldn't she look away? The dog finally looked up, just once, just long enough for Claire to see what was behind those tired amber eyes. It wasn't just sadness, it was surrender. It was every ounce of strength. A creature had left, packed into a single, quiet gaze that asked nothing and still begged everything. Claire took a slow step forward, heart thudding louder than the wind. Their eyes locked, and for a moment there was no storm, no form. Number, clock ticking toward 3 p.m. Just two broken things, staring at each other across a line they both knew they were about to cross. Claire's boots echoed against the shelter's cold concrete floor, the fluorescent lights above flickering like they were struggling to stay awake. She had seen dogs before, dozens of them barking, pawing, whimpering for attention. But this kennel was different. There was no sound, just stillness. Max sat in the corner of his enclosure, motionless, his amber eyes locked onto Claire's, as if he were reading a book only he could understand. The other dogs barked wildly at the new visitor, but Max stayed quiet, his silence louder than any howl. Claire's breath caught. She wasn't sure why. There was no growl, no movement, not even a flick of the tail. Just that stare-piercing, hollow, and unbearably calm. It wasn't fear she felt, not quite. It was recognition. Something in his look made the room vanish. The chatter, the clatter, the walls. For a fleeting second, it was just her and Max, frozen in a silence too loud to ignore. Claire blinked. The words punched harder than she expected. Aggressive. He hadn't moved. Unadoptable. Who decides that? The tag felt like more than a warning. It felt like a verdict. Like someone had looked at Max and stamped him with finality. No hope. No future. She read it again, slowly this time, almost as if testing it. But the word that lingered in her chest wasn't aggressive. It was unadoptable. A sentence, not a description. Max hadn't growled, hadn't lunged. He had just started, and somehow that said more than any bark ever could. Max, he's not what he seems, Marla said, her voice low, almost apologetic. She was the shelter's director, worn from years of trying to mend what the world kept breaking. Claire kept her eyes on Max. What happened to him? Marla sighed, folding her arms like she needed to hold herself together. He was a bait dog in a fighting ring. Came in 6 months ago. Scars all over, most of them you can't see. Flinches at loud sounds. Doesn't trust men. Barely eats. Never barks. Claire's stomach turned. Marla glanced at her. He doesn't get visitors. No one stays. He just waits. Like he's already decided what his life's gonna be. And it ain't this. The kennel was tucked into the farthest corner of the shelter, dimmer than the rest. Forgotten, just like its occupant. Claire stepped closer. Max didn't move. The floor was clean but barren, no blanket, no toys, nothing that resembled warmth or comfort. 6 months in that silence, no touch, no voice calling his name with affection. Just the routine scrape of food trays and the passing of time that didn't heal. She could feel it, the absence of life in that space. Not death, not exactly. Just a long, slow fade. Max had become a shadow among shadows, and Claire had just walked into his quiet world. Claire took a shaky step back. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, knuckles whitening. This was too much. She hadn't come for this. Maybe a small terrier, a senior dog needing gentle walks, something manageable, something safe. Max was not safe, not emotionally, not for someone still learning how to breathe again after everything she'd lost. Her throat clenched, His eyes hadn't changed, hadn't blinked, just watched. Not with judgment, but with a grief so deep, it scared her. "I can't do this," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She turned, ready to leave, heart pounding. But her legs felt heavier than they should have, like part of her was being left behind. She stopped, hand on the edge of the gate, and dared one more glance. Max hadn't moved, not an inch, but the ache in her chest widened because the hollowness in his stare. It wasn't rage. It was absent, she recognized. That was the look she wore in the mirror most mornings. Since the accident, since the funeral, since silence became her closest companion, Max didn't scare her. He reflected on her. Two beings breathing in a world that had stopped making sense. She didn't need a wagging tail or sloppy kisses. She needed understanding, something real. And Max, without a word, without a gesture, had given her that somewhere between pain and survival they had found a shared language. She just hadn't realized it yet. Claire took a step forward again, then stopped herself. No, she needed to go. This was crazy. But as she turned one final time, Max's eyes caught hers again, not pleading, not hopeful, but waiting, as if he knew she'd look back. As if he had bet everything on that one glance. And in that frozen second, something unspoken passed between them. A quiet agreement, a silent scream. She blinked fast, suddenly aware that her fingers were gripping the chain-link fence. Max hadn't moved, but his eyes just for a fraction of a moment softened. Not enough to be sure, but enough to wonder. Claire's heart pulled, and in that quiet ache, she knew she couldn't unsee that moment. And Max, he knew she wouldn't. Claire held her breath. She had done this every day for nearly a week. Kneel quietly, hand outstretched, offering a soft biscuit through the bars of Max's kennel. And every day he ignored her. His eyes were distant, sunken with grief. A soul, not broken by abuse alone, but by abandonment. But today was different. His nose twitched. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Max crept forward. His paws made no sound, but his eyes, those sad honey-colored eyes, never left Claire's. One step, then another. Claire didn't dare move. Then, with a trembling hesitation, Max stretched his, necked forward and took the treat from her fingers. Her heart stopped. A wave of tears surged in her chest, but she swallowed them down, knowing any sudden emotion might spook him. It wasn't just a snack, it was the first thread of trust. Fragile, precious. It meant Max was still in there. Somewhere, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready to be found. Claire returned every day with a novel in hand and the same routine: read aloud, speak softly, and never, ever reach for him. At first, Max stayed curled in the farthest corner, ears alert but body rigid. But with each passing day, his posture softened. He inched closer, a foot away one day, a length the next. By day 10, he lay near the bars, watching her lips move as she read The Little Prince. His head tilted, eyes blinking slow. Claire didn't rush. She just turned each page with deliberate calm, letting silence fill the space between them. Words had once been Claire's only comfort in her darkest nights. Now she was offering that same comfort to a dog who had forgotten how to trust. Each visit, Max came a little closer, and each day, Claire left with her heart just a little fuller. On a rainy Tuesday morning, something changed. Claire was seated, reading softly, when Max stood up, crossed his kennel, and laid down by the front gate, his body mere inches from Her fingers. One of the staff members gasped audibly from across the hall. That dog hasn't moved near anyone in weeks, murmured Maria, the shelter director. He's choosing her. Claire glanced up, caught in disbelief. Max wasn't just tolerating her. He was reaching for her in his own wake, quietly, cautiously, but with intention, and for the first time, the word hope didn't feel so far-fetched. Claire started naming the milestones, little victories only she and Max could understand. There was the first eye contact day, the biscuit acceptance day, and now the tail wag day. It happened when she arrived late one afternoon, her hair soaked from unexpected rain. Max was standing at the front of his kennel, ears perked. His eyes lit up as he saw her. Then just once his tail gave a tiny, unsure wag. Claire froze. It wasn't much, but for a dog who'd flinched at every sound, that hesitant wag was a celebration. Claire laughed softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You missed me," she whispered, "didn't you?" The tail wagged again, as Max began trusting her. Claire began opening up too. She told him things she hadn't said out loud in years about the car accident, the panic attacks, the guilt of surviving when others hadn't. Max never looked away. One evening, as she sat against the kennel bars with tears streaking her cheeks, Max lay beside her, mirroring her stillness. She whispered, "I'm broken too." And maybe he didn't understand the words, but in the way he rested his chin against the bars, as if offering silent support, Claire felt something shift. She wasn't alone in her brokenness anymore. Claire laughed through tears as Max shuffled, closer than ever before. He sniffed her hand, paused, and then, in one startling, unexpected moment, he nudged her wrist gently with his nose. A soft boop, she gasped. Not because it hurt, but because it healed. The touch was light, but the meaning behind it was enormous. A nuzzle, a test of trust, a question and an answer, all in one. Claire didn't move. She just let him stay there, her hand still, her breath caught. That moment was more than affectionate, was a connection. A quiet vow, shared in silence. When the leash clipped onto Max's collar for the first time, his legs trembled. The hallway outside the kennel looked enormous, bright, loud, but Claire stood beside him, calm and steady. "It's just you and me." "Max," she whispered, one step at a time. He hesitated at the door, then one paw forward, then another. They walked slowly around the fenced yard. No tugging, no force, just Claire holding the leash loosely, letting Max lead. The breeze ruffled his fur, a bird chirped nearby, and when Max looked up at her, his eyes weren't filled with fear, they held something else, trust at night. Max whimpered in his sleep short, sharp sounds that spoke of past horrors. Claire knew those sounds too well. She'd lie awake in her apartment, her own memories creeping in like shadow sirens. Shattered glass. The moment her world changed, Max and Claire, two souls wounded in different battles, found each other in the stillness of the night. She'd call the shelter, asking to stay late, just to sit near his kennel during the worst hours, and somehow, hearing Max settle his breathing syncing with hers helped her feel less alone. They were both fighting invisible wars, but they were no longer fighting them alone. One night, Max woke screaming, his paws scraping against the concrete as if fleeing something only he could see. Claire startled awake on the bench beside him, chest tight with panic. But she didn't run. She knelt, gently calling his name. "It's okay. It's just a dream. You're safe now." As he calmed, curling near her feet, Claire's own hands stopped trembling. The irony wasn't lost on her. Comforting him helped quiet her demons too. Their trauma was different, but their pain was shared. And in that shared pain, something beautiful began to grow. Understanding Claire sat cross-legged on the cold shelter floor, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. It was 3:04 a.m. Max lay next to her, head resting on her thigh, his eyes closed, breath steady. She stroked his fur slowly, rhythmically. The world outside was still a mess. Her past hadn't changed. Neither had his. But here, in this moment, they were just two beings who had found comfort in each other's quiet presence. The night was no longer something to fear, because they weren't facing it alone. The news came. Like thunder, the city planned to inspect and potentially downsize the shelter. Due to funding cuts, Claire overheard Maria's voice break during the staff meeting. If the shelter didn't meet the requirements, dogs like Max, those labeled non-adoptable, could be transferred, or worse. Claire's stomach dropped. Max's progress was fragile. One change could undo everything. She glanced at him, peacefully dozing near the gate. They didn't have time, and she didn't have forever to make a decision. Maria slid the adoption paperwork across the desk. It's now or never. Claire, her hands shook. Adoption meant commitment, permanence, risk. What if she failed him? But then she looked out the window. Max was waiting, tail wagging, eyes full of quiet hope. She remembered the nose boop, the tail wag, the walk. Finally, Claire had 24 hours to submit the documents and arrange transport. Everything blurred into chaos calls to her landlord, vet appointments, background checks, all while Max sat quietly, sensing the storm around him but never flinching. She ran through city offices, heart pounding, knowing one wrong form could delay everything at the final hour. She handed over the last paper, approved. As she returned to the shelter, Max met her at the gate, tail wagging, eyes gleaming. She knelt, arms open. Let's go home. And for the first time, Max didn't hesitate. He walked into her arms. Claire juggled her keys in one hand and grocery bags in the other as she approached her apartment door. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that made the hallway feel longer than usual. She stopped cold. A stained, crumpled envelope fluttered slightly in the evening breeze, taped crookedly to her door. Her breath hitched. She dropped the bags instantly. With trembling fingers, she peeled the note off the wood. The handwriting was jagged, almost angry in its slant. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear anything else. The hallway suddenly felt quieter, too quiet, as her eyes scanned. The letter, her fingers tightened around it, crumpling the edges further. It wasn't just a note, it was a warning. Her hands shook as she reread the note under the hallway light. He's mine. You stole him. You'll regret this. No name, but Claire didn't need one. She knew exactly who it was. Max's former owner. The words clawed into her mind like icy fingers. Claire's throat went dry, her chest tightening. A part of her wanted to run, to protect Max, to make sure he was okay. Another part of her burned. With fury, how dare he? Max wasn't a thing to be stolen. He was a soul rescued from torment, finally safe, finally loved. But that safety now teetered on the edge of a paper-thin threat at the police station. Claire sat on the cold metal bench, clutching the note in a Ziploc bag like it might vanish. The officer behind the desk scanned it, then sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. We can't do much, he muttered. He's got a pending case. Still has some visitation rights technically, until the court says otherwise. Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. He left scars on Max. He abandoned him. I get it, the officer said, softer now. But unless he harms you or breaks the law, we're stuck. Just be careful. She left the station more frustrated than when she walked in. Fear crawled in under her skin, but she wouldn't let it settle. Claire didn't wait. The next morning, she called a lawyer, printed paperwork, and stood in a long, silent line at the courthouse. She wasn't just filing a restraining order. She was drawing a line in the sand. The clerk looked up at her as she slid the documents. "Across he won't come near Max again," Claire said, her voice low but steady. She wouldn't be bullied out of love knot when she'd fought so hard to earn Max's trust. If it came down to it, she'd fight for him in every way that mattered. The days ticked down like a slow, grinding clock. Claire tried to go about life as usual, walks with Max, coffee in the mornings, a quiet evening routine, but nothing felt normal. She jumped at every sound. Max seemed to sense it. He followed her from room to room, ears perked, eyes alert. Sometimes he'd sit at the door, watching, waiting. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a waiting room before a storm. Every creak in the floorboards made Claire's heart skip. It was nearly midnight when Claire stepped out of the shower, steam still rising around her. As she toweled her hair, something felt off. She paused, peering down the hallway. The front door. It was open wide, like it had been kicked in or forgotten. Claire's blood ran cold. "Max," she called out, her voice cracking. "Max." No sound. She ran barefoot through the apartment, calling his name, every step heavier than the last. The backyard gate creaked. Her stomach churned. Was someone still here? Had someone taken him? Tears sprang to her eyes as she darted through the house, frantic. The silence was deafening. Then something, a faint rustle in the bathroom. She pushed the bathroom door open, hands trembling. And there he was, curled behind the curtain like a wounded soldier returning from war. Max's eyes met hers, wide and wet. A thin line of blood ran down from above his brow, barely visible beneath his fur. His body trembled. "Oh God, Max," Claire whispered, dropping to her knees. He didn't whimper, didn't move, but when she touched his paw, he nudged her hand gently with his nose, as if to say, "I made it back." Claire scoured the apartment, heart racing. Nothing was missing. Not her wallet, not her laptop. The door hadn't been forced. There were no muddy footprints, just a wet smear near the back wall. It didn't make sense. Until it did. This wasn't a robbery. It was a warning. Someone had come for Max and backed off, or been interrupted. Claire looked at the blood on her sleeve, her chest aching. This was no longer just a custody dispute. After that night, Max changed. He no longer napped on the couch or retreated to his corner bed. Instead, he planted himself at Claire's feet every night, every hour. He tracked her every move, eyes constantly scanning the doors, ears twitching at distant sounds. The old fear had returned to his body, but there was something else in it, to fierce loyalty. He wasn't guarding himself anymore. He was guarding her. It was a Thursday night, quiet, too quiet. Claire had just turned off the TV when Max shot. Up from the floor, ears pinned forward, body rigid. His growls started low, like distant thunder. Claire froze, then footsteps, slow. Deliberate crunches on the gravel path outside. Claire's blood ran cold. She crept toward the window, heart pounding. A shadow flickered past the curtain. The outline of a man. Max's growl became a bark sharp, unrelenting. The shadow stopped, then turned toward the door. The knob jiggled, the door rattled, and Max lost it. He lunged forward, planting himself between Claire and the door, his bark booming through the hallway. He snarled, teeth bared, body poised like a soldier ready for war. "Back off," Claire shouted, backing toward the kitchen to grab her phone. Max didn't budge, even as the figure outside banged the door. Once twice Max stayed rooted, refusing to let him through. For the first time, Claire wasn't the one protecting Max. Max was protecting her. Lights flipped on in nearby apartments. Windows opened. Voices called out, "Everything okay there?" Claire shouted through the door, "Call the police." Max's bark never wavered. He stood like a wall of muscle and heart, daring anyone to get through. The man outside cursed, then vanished into the night, but not fast enough to squad cars arrive within minutes. Claire pointed toward the alley. That way, he just ran. They caught him blocks away. Out of breath and holding something in his coat, Max's old collar, they booked him for trespassing, breaking parole and violating a restraining order. The officer who once shrugged now looked her square in the eye. "You did good, Claire. And that dog, he's a damn hero." That night, Claire sat curled on the couch, arms around Max. His breathing was slow, steady, but his eyes stayed open a little longer than usual. Watching the door as the quiet finally settled, he nudged his head under her arm and sighed. Claire pressed her forehead to his. "You saved me," she whispered. Max didn't need words. His presence said it all. "I've got you, always." The lobby buzzed softly with distant chatter, but all eyes slowly drifted to the German shepherd walking calmly beside Claire. His stride was steady, his eyes gentle, nothing like the frightened, skittish animal she'd first met. Max wore a vest now, bright blue, with the words "therapy dog" in training stitched across the sides. The nurses smiled as they passed, surprised at how composed he was. Max didn't flinch at the sound of wheelchairs or clattering trays. Instead, he paused beside each door, as if he could sense who needed him next. Claire glanced down at him, her hand brushing his back. "Ready, Max?" He wagged his tail once, slow, sure, as if to say, "I've got this." Inside room 204, an older man with hollow eyes sat staring at a blank TV screen. His name was Earl. He hadn't spoken in weeks. Max padded over quietly and rested his head on Earl's lap. At first, nothing. Then, slowly, Earl's trembling hand reached out, fingers brushing the top of Max's head. Max didn't move. He simply breathed calm, present, real. A quiet sob escaped the man's lips. "He reminds me of my old canine partner," he whispered, in another room. Max gently placed his paw on a double amputee's thigh. The man chuckled through tears. Smart boy, he knows. Everywhere Max went, pain loosened its grip. The veterans didn't need words, they had Max. And Max had known pain too. That's why he understood. Leaning against the doorway, Claire watched Max as he comforted a young vet in a wheelchair. The woman wiped her eyes, laughing softly as Max licked her fingers. Claire's heart swelled. Just 6 months ago, Max wouldn't let anyone touch him. He would hide in corners, flinch at sudden movements, tremble in his sleep. Now, he was healing others. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of something purer, pride, gratitude. Or, he wasn't just surviving anymore, Max was living, and helping others do the same. Claire used to dread the silence of the night. It was in the quiet that her memories screamed, the loudest echoes of loneliness, grief, and trauma. But now, each evening closed with a familiar thump as Max leaped onto the bed, circling once before curling up beside her. His warmth pressed gently against her hip, a steady heartbeat beneath layers of fur. No more jolting awake, no more cold sweats, just the soft rhythm of Max's snoring and the occasional twitch of his paws as he dreamed. He had become her peace, her anchor in the dark. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor, illuminating a mess only dog owners would understand. A toppled chew toy muddy paw prints on the hallway runner, and the faint smell of peanut butter treats in the air. On the walls hung framed photos Max chasing butterflies. Max in a Santa hat, Max sprawled on his back, tongue out in defiance of dignity. Laughter echoed now. Claire's laughter. This house, once a quiet shelter for a lonely heart, had transformed into a gallery of joy. Max didn't just fill a void, he rebuilt a home. Whenever visitors came by, Burr's friends, even delivery guys, they'd always stop to pet Max. They'd marvel at his obedience, his gentleness, his soulful eyes. Claire would smile every time. "He's not just a rescue," she'd say softly, voice thick with emotion. "He rescued me too." It wasn't a figure of speech. Max had walked into her broken world with quiet strength and fierce loyalty. He didn't just help her heal. He made her believe in healing again. The scent of pumpkin and peanut butter filled the kitchen as Claire carefully frosted a dog-friendly cake. A little bone-shaped candle sat at the top. "Happy Gotcha Day, Max," she whispered, placing the treat in front of him. His tail thumped wildly, eyes wide with joy. On the living room TV, the video from 6 months ago played the moment Claire first saw Max at the shelter, his fur matted, his eyes unsure. She sat beside him on the floor now, wrapping her arms gently around his neck. "You chose me that day," she murmured, "and I'll spend the rest of my life choosing you right back." As guests gathered for Gotcha Day, Claire knelt before Max with a gentle smile. In her hands, a sign on a ribbon. She draped it around his neck and stepped back, wiping away a tear as she read the words aloud. "I wasn't unadoptable. I was just waiting for her." Gasps, then applause. Phones clicked photos. But Max, he just sat there, proud and still, tail wagging like a banner in the breeze. Claire's eyes met his. No words were spoken. None were needed. Two souls, once broken, had found each other in a world that too often overlooks the quiet, the damaged, the scared. Now they were whole, together, because sometimes love doesn't come in perfection. It comes in second chances. Claire sat on the park bench, her gaze fixed on Max as he gently nudged the hand of an elderly woman in a wheelchair. There was a time not long ago when even a step toward a stranger would send him into a trembling retreat. Now, he walked with purpose and compassion. She often thought back to that first day. The trembling, the growls, the way he hid in the corner as if waiting for disappointment. People called him aggressive, but Claire saw through it. Fear was never feral. It was just ... protective. Max wasn't mean, she whispered to herself. He was scared and tired of being left behind. It wasn't easy breaking through his walls. But once she did, something shifted. Not just in him, but in her, too. The ones who wait the longest, they're not lost. They're just waiting for someone to finally see them. There were nights when Claire nearly gave up, when Max shredded pillows in panic, barked at shadows, and refused to be touched. Friends told her he wasn't fixable, but she stayed, sat on the floor beside him for hours, whispered words he didn't yet understand. You're safe, you're loved. The day he rested his head on her lap was the day something unspoken broke. She realized then the real rescue didn't happen when she brought him home. It happened every single day she chose not to give up. Sometimes it's not about grand gestures, it's about showing up. Again and again. Max had scars, seen and unseen, but so did Claire. She just hid hers better. His flinches mirrored her hesitation. With people, his distrust echoed her own walls built from betrayal. In Max, she saw the version of herself that needed healing, and slowly, as she taught him trust, patience, and hope, she learned them too. Max didn't just change because of Claire. Claire changed because of Max. He wasn't just a dog she saved. He was the reflection that helped her find the pieces she'd long buried. People always said Claire saved Max, but the truth wasn't that simple. Max had a way of sensing sadness, nudging her gently on sleepless nights, curling beside her during storms, offering silent company in grief. Their healing wasn't a straight line. It came in waves, in setbacks, in tiny victories, but it came. Love didn't rush. It waited. It stayed. And through that, they mended each other's wounds, not with perfection, but with patience. Two souls, once broken, now stood whole because they walked the hard path together. Today, Max wore a blue vest labeled Therapy Dog. He stood calmly at the hospital doorway, tail swaying, eyes warm. The dog, once labeled unadoptable, was now changing lives. Children clung to him. Veterans cried into his fur. Nurses whispered, "We needed this today." Claire stood in the background, tears brimming not from sadness, but awe. Max's journey from a terrified shelter case to a beacon of hope was nothing short of a miracle. He wasn't just saved, he was reborn, and in doing so, he became a light for others still in the dark.